Get- We are in the book of Joshua, starting in chapter 23. Now, this story actually spills over into the book of Judges, and that's not really a surprise because the way the books of the Bible were written, when they cover history, often you'll see some overlap in there, and that gives you an idea of which book followed the one before it. And in this case, our focus is on Joshua. Now, you may remember that Joshua was the great leader of the Israelites after Moses died. Now, Joshua had always been serving God, and he'd been one of the original 12 spies to go into the land of Canaan to see what was there, and he had come back with a great report saying that, oh, we can take this land, God is with us. And that showed from a very early time that he was focused on doing God's will. Well, at this point in the story, he has led the Israelites into the promised land, and they've been conquering country after country after country, or I should say nation after nation, in the promised land, just as God wanted to have done. The nations living there already had been really bad people. God had put up with them for a long time. And in fact, uh, God does give a warning to his own people that, hey, if you act like these folks, I'm going to do the same thing to you that you have done to them. And that's a little bit of foreshadowing, which means it's a little bit of a warning of what is going to happen eventually. But during the time of Joshua, the Israelites were pretty strong. At least they were following their leaders, and their leaders were following God. So you had Joshua, but you also had the different tribal leaders, and they all had the same mindset that, yes, God is behind all of this, and he has brought us to this point and given us this land, and we are going to do what he told us to do. Well, after many years of doing this, there were still some nations that lived in the promised land and just had not been driven out yet. They were really not a threat militarily to Israel at this point, although they were a threat as long as they lived there because of the lifestyle that they had. And if the Israelites started acting like them, then bad things were going to happen. But uh, at this point, Joshua knows he's pretty old and he's not going to live much longer, and he calls all of Israel to him. And don't expect that every single person actually went, but the important people, the leaders, and people who could make it to Joshua would have gone there to listen to him. And what he does is to remind the people of their history, and he goes back to before Abraham. Now, you may remember the people Abraham came from did not know God, and they just followed whatever gods they thought might exist in that time. And so there were those, they were not true gods, but those folks followed them. And that's important to bring up because all of the Israelites are descended from Abraham. And so they need to see that, hey, look, way back in the old days, the relatives did not follow the real God. And so he reminds them of that. Then he reminds them of being in Egypt. And there were those gods that were there that could not stand up to the real God when it came right down to it. Then there were the gods of the people who lived in the land they're conquering. And Joshua points out all of these false gods were failures, did not save the people that worshiped them. And Joshua just puts it to the people and says, now look, you can follow these other gods if you want to, but for me and my family, we're following the real God. And the people there are going, no, we'll follow him too. We're going to follow the real God. And so they're very emphatic about it. They're saying that, yes, we're going to follow the real God. But what we see in the following chapters is that what they say and what they do are two different things. Well, Joshua does die, and at that point, things start to go wrong, or we start noticing things are going wrong. Now, it starts off well enough because you have the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Simeon get together to fight these nations that are living on their land, and they work together and they have a lot of success with it. But what we see the other tribes doing, they seem to be going on their own after these other nations. They're living in the land allotted to them. So you have the tribe of Dan, and it says, okay, there's this group here that we need to drive off, and we'll do it ourselves. And they go in and they fail. The tribe of Naphtali does the same thing. Tribe after tribe seems to be trying to do it on their own and forgetting that they had their great success when they put God first and they all worked together. Well, they're not doing this now, and that's the first sign that things are not going well, because in not driving out these people, they finally decide, okay, we can take care of things ourselves, and there's no real threat from them, and they let these other nations stay. Well, that causes problems, because after this older generation of people who did a good job following God dies off, the ones who come along after them think, oh, well, that's not such a big deal. We don't really have to do that. And they have forgotten that God made promises. Now, they remember the promises of God saying, okay, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to conquer for you. But they forgot the promises God made, that if you choose not to follow me, if you start acting like the people act, that I'm giving you their land, then I will do the same thing to you that I've done to them. Well, this is the beginning of that series of problems. And it starts innocently enough. They first let these people stay here, and they force them to work real hard for them. Well, that was not what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to drive them out, but they let them stay. Well, then those people start influencing the Israelites. Now, one of the other issues that the Israelites have is that they do not have a king in the sense that other nations have kings. You see, God is their leader. Moses did things a king would do as far as leading them, but he was very clear in saying he was not the king. He was just passing along what God said to do. Joshua had done the same thing. He did things just like a king, but he was not the king, and he always pointed to God as being the leader. You see, God was the king of the Israelites, but the Israelites forgot or decided that it didn't matter who was the king, because they didn't see a person who was going to come down and actually do something to them. So they start deciding to do what they think is right in their own eyes. And often that meant doing things that were wrong, and especially wrong in God's eyes. So this is going to cause problems for years and years down the line as the Israelites go through this process of, okay, we'll follow God, then they'll say, let's just do whatever we want to do. Then bad things will happen. Then they'll cry out to God, and God will rescue them, and they'll follow God again for a while. So this pattern is beginning at this point, and they are forgetting the promises they had made when Joshua told them, follow whoever you want to follow. because they had said at that time, we will follow the Lord. We are going to follow the true God. And we're going to see how easy it is that the people fall away. Now, that's a story for another day. And so I'm going to close today's lesson with an explanation of my tie. And here I'm showing a warrior, and that's to represent Joshua during the time that he was a leader for the Israelites, because Joshua never wavered. He was well aware of what would happen if the people didn't follow God, and he chose to strongly defend God and to say, I'm going to follow him. And that's the lesson we can learn from Joshua, because nothing went wrong for Joshua because his focus was on God. Now, bad things would happen around him, but he knew where he stood with God, and that was the most important thing to him, and he followed that until the day he died. All right, with that, I'm going to let you go, and I hope you'll be back next time. Bye.